Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our community conversation. I'm Jenny, and I'm the Head of Finance and Operations here at Northamptonshire Community Foundation, and also the Staff Champion for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. During the past 18 months, we've had so many restrictions in our lives. For me, the one thing that I found has really helped is being able to go for walks in fields near my house or around salty forests or local parks. For a lot of people, though, this is not possible. In fact, only 47% of the world's population live within 400 metres of an open public space. This is why I have chosen to champion UN SDG 11, which aims to make cities and other settlements inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable. Since becoming champion for UN SDG 11, I've seen some statistics that really shocked me. Currently, only half of the world's population have convenient access to public transport. This has an effect on people's ability to get to their jobs, their places of education and medical appointments. 9 in 10 people living in urban areas worldwide breathe air that does not meet the World Health Organization's air quality guidelines. And air pollution is believed to be the cause of millions of premature deaths around the world. In order to resolve these issues and create sustainable cities and communities, the United Nations created targets to be achieved by 2030. Some of these are that everyone will have access to safe, affordable housing, the reduction of the environmental impact of cities, paying special attention to air quality, universal access to safe, inclusive and accessible green and public spaces, and access to safe, affordable and sustainable transport systems for all. Here at NCF, we are supporting groups that are doing their bit to help Northamptonshire reach these targets. On the panel today, we have representatives of some of these groups. We have Anne Stevens from Friends of Abington Park, the group who work to improve and enhance Abington Park, making it an enjoyable place for the community. Phil Houston from DACT, who provide community transport, helping the elderly get to medical appointments. And finally, George Hill from one of our fund holders, KHL Big Local, who have helped fund local projects such as Save the Planet, an environmental project teaching children about their local ecosystem. For now, I am going to hand over to Rachel McGrath, Grants Director and the Deputy CEO here at the Foundation.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for that really insightful overview about Global Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and highlighting some of the brilliant projects that are taking place to address some of those issues around that, including accessible green spaces and community transport. And welcome to our panel today, George, Anne and Phil. We're so delighted that you can join us in this community conversation. So just to get a bit started and just to warm up, I'm going to ask you all about what local activity or commitments are you carrying out to help build sustainable cities locally? And obviously this could be as your role as a donor, part of the giving circle or the local charity that you represent, or even in a personal capacity. And we will start with Phil.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invite to speak this afternoon. So in terms of DACT, I represent Daventry Area Community Transport, more locally known as DACT, as these things often are. And I've recently, back in October, taken over as Chief Executive, as the former Chief Executive Rob Kinning and the founder retired. And the services that we provide currently, we have 6 fully accessible minibuses that we use around the community for lots of different activities. At the moment, we've only got 3 of them on the road, just because of as demand is picking up now after the pandemic and stuff. I say after the pandemic, we're obviously still kind of in it, but as we're starting to see a bit more relaxation and things, we're getting up and running again. So we've got 3 of those on the road. We work under something called a Section 19 permit, which means that we're not allowed to take over roles like coach firms and things would do. So we can't just go around picking up the general public or going and taking people on shopping trips from local villages and stuff, unless they're formed as a proper constituted group. So if they're formed as a proper constituted group, then we can, then they affiliate to us for a nominal fee a year. And then they can hire one of our buses. and then they can basically go wherever they want. So if they wanted to go down to the coast down south somewhere, or up to Scotland for a week, as we've had on a number of occasions, they can use the buses for whatever purpose and stuff that they want. Our use of the buses in terms of DACT itself, as well as for the affiliated groups, is for a dial ride service, which is in Daventry. We have 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. Rachel, I was going to say to you, I have always lots to say, so if at any point you want me to shut up, just tell me to do so. That's not a problem. So basically we run what we call a dial ride service, which is picking people up. It's the elderly and disabled mainly, from their homes who struggle to get out on public transport, and we pick them up on market days in Daventry, which is Tuesdays and Fridays, and we pick them up to their house, take them out, and they go around the shops for a couple of hours or meet up with friends, and then we take them back to their doors again with all of their shopping and stuff, and then drop them back home again, and that's twice a week. We also do something called DAC Days Out, which is basically day trips out. And we can range from anywhere, so say going to Hunstanton to the seaside, to going to stately homes, National Trust. We go to shopping centres across the country, all sorts of different things, depending on what people are interested in doing. I would say at this moment in time that things are really starting to pick up again for us on that front. Obviously, everybody's been a bit nervous about getting out and about in minibuses and stuff with other people, but that's now starting to pick up for us, which is brilliant. We also offer something called the Midas training, which is a minibus assessment training that we do through our national body, which is the National Community Transport Association, and that's basically just assessing people, making sure they're competent enough to drive the buses and are safe for for people to get on board with. And the last thing we run with our minibuses is the travel clubs, which is where we encourage local, mainly rural villages to come together, set up a constituted group, and then they can borrow one of our buses or hire one of our buses then to go and do whatever they want, wherever they want to. So it's like an affiliated group, but it tends to be people in one village, and they generally want to do things like go out to shopping to Rugby or Northampton or somewhere to kind of to go shopping for that period of time. It's normally places where public transport is either non-existent or very limited, so they like a bit more control with that. So that's that. We also run as Rachel was saying about the car service for medical appointments. So we take elderly and disabled people and those out in rural communities that don't have access to public transport. We take them to their medical appointments all over the country. In fact, we've just taken somebody today to Leeds Hospital. So we do go quite far and wide, and our volunteers are brilliant. And most of them are quite happy to do whatever's necessary. We also run a mobility shop in the centre of town here at Daventry, which sells all sorts of mobility equipment, and we hire out wheelchairs and scooters so that folks can get around the town, and even some people hire them for weekends and stuff to be able to get away and take them when they're going on trips and stuff. And we also do recycling, so people donate wheelchairs and scooters and things to us, and we recycle them. Sold on to other folks, and that's probably pretty much all what we do.
Well, thank you very much, Phil, and giving a real oversight in how you're making communities and towns and local villages more accessible, safe, enjoyable for people, particularly those who are older and those with disabilities. Over to George.
Hello, Rachel. Thank you for the invite, and Phil, that's a lot of stuff going on there in your community. So well done to you and your team for doing that. It sounds really valuable and worthwhile. Thank you to NCF, I should say, as well, for the work that you do. County-wide, it's a lot of stuff goes on. Maybe not as publicised as much as it should be, but it's great work, and many people in my community have benefited from it. So I'm involved with KHL Big Local, which is a national lottery funded project. I'm a volunteer. I work full time nights, but in my spare time I'm the chair of KHL Big Local, and I live in the community. So KHL Big Local, I'm just going to refer to my leaflet, so sometimes I can just rhyme it all off, but since it's a kind of list you're looking for, we've we formed in 2010, and there's 150 big local areas in England, and we're one of them. Kingswood estate and Hazel Lee's estate in Corby. So the work that we do is we invest in a number of projects. So we invest in the Citizens Advice Bureau to provide advice to anyone in Kingswood and Hazel Lee's, and that has been really positive because it's such a big financial impact and a well-being impact. It's got people back on their feet, cleared up, you know, benefit claims and illegal claims and stuff. So that is really something that we're really continuing with. We're working with Home Start, the preschool children team who work in Kingswood and Hazel Lee's with families at risk. We're investing in a local community in sheds based on the Men in Sheds idea, which is ready to be launched in the coming probably maybe 6 weeks. So that's where creative activities can go on, like woodwork and sewing and music and stuff. So we're doing that as well. We're working on upgrading skate parks in our 2 estates here where I live. We're also involved with a creative program, which is Creative Civic Change, is to create to offer creative activities for people in the 2 estates. We have an annual festival. We have we fund some youth work, environmental work. There's a nature park. We do a lot of work with the Borough Council. Well, it's not the Borough Council now, it's Northants Council, because it's a unitary, so we've got a good relationship with them, so we support projects that, you know, together. So, and just to mention that it's really, I think I heard in the conversations earlier about people doing things on their own, but it's when you come together you can do much more, you know. So there's lots of little bits and bobs going on, but coming together, the collective is, I feel, is always better than the, not better, but it's more than the individual can do. So coming together is really important. Collaboration and the improvements in these 2 estates, because Kingswood particularly has had historically bad reputation, but it's improving and we're working to improve it every day. So, and the green project, we're blessed in Corby with many green spaces, and we're looking to fund a project that will do some stuff around that as well. We've funded a lot of projects through the NCF, our community chest fund, and it's £500 to £5,000 that groups and individuals can apply for, and Rachel and Anthony and the team over there do a great job in administering that and sending all the applications to us. So, and we've also installed Wi-Fi in the 2 neighbourhood centres, which is giving people access to, again, this pandemic time, the centres haven't been open, but they're starting to open up again, so people can go in and use, you know, for job hunting or for leisure. And, you know, the young people use the Wi-Fi as well. So yeah, but yeah, there's lots going on, but that's pretty much the gist of it.
Thank you, George, and thank you for giving our panel and the rest of us a sort of whistle-stop tour of the really key work that KHL Big Local is doing to help improve people's made-up environments and housing, and the importance of partnership. I really took from what you said in terms of networks and activities and connecting people together, and also, as you highlight, particularly during this pandemic, the digital community, so yes, getting people connected particularly. Thank you. Over to Anne.
Oh, wow. I feel rather daunted by what I've heard so far, Rachel. And what's interesting is that both of you are doing amazing work, but which I was totally unaware of. So thank you, NCF, once again for bringing us together, because I feel that is the key. Well, I work with a small committee to run the Friends of Abington Park. So we're a community group. And obviously we have ambitions and ideas, and we try to serve the local community in as many ways as we can, but we don't have the sort of facilities available to us that we've just heard from my 2 co-panelists today. What we have tried to do, and this actually started pre-COVID, but I think during COVID it's been important, we set up a new website, which is not a Friends of Abington Park website, it's a community hub for people who use Abington Park. And as some of you at least will know, Abington Park is a kind of destination park. It's a park that people come to from all over the county, in fact, all over the country. They leave Northampton and come back to Abington Park for all sorts of reasons, all of which is fine. What's more difficult is the challenge of then creating a community to work for the good of the park. It's much more difficult, I found, to knit together a community within the vicinity than in some of the smaller areas, curiously enough. So the website then is launched as a kind of community hub, and we've especially invited, and it is working, to get local groups who don't have websites, don't have any PR, don't do any of those things, but are doing really helpful, interesting, regular things in and around the park, and they can post things up, they can send us some news or whatever they're doing, and that has helped a lot. It's also been one of the means by which we've created a really active litter picking group, which sounds trivial, but actually it's the most active group. It's amazing, and it's cut right across all sorts of aspects of the community. And I agree with you about digital as well, but and so the litter pickers group, they all work from a WhatsApp group. They're amazingly organized. They've zoned the whole park, and then they WhatsApp each other, so they cover the entire park every day between them. But I do also produce a printed newsletter. We have just over 300 members, and that includes a number of groups like local nursery schools, residents associations, and all sorts of others. So it's a kind of multiplier as well. But we have just over 80 members who are not on email at all. And so we have to produce printed matter for them. And I think that's something which is quite a challenge and can be difficult. And in normal times, we also have meetings every couple of months as well, where we bring people in to talk about what's going on. We actually have a membership scheme where people are asked to donate something, just a small amount, but it creates a fund which enables us to then apply for further funding, or sometimes just to fund things. And again, can I echo the words of others and the wonderful work, Rachel, that all of you do at NCF. It's been brilliant. And you will know you've helped us to fund and get together. We renewed the sensory garden, which has been really important. We've just created a new community garden, which has been an absolute godsend in the it's a picnic area for families to come to, and we get the graffiti cleaned up as soon as we can down there. We do have a major problem with vandalism. We also created a boule court, and that's very good because that's got disabled access as well, because one of the things we're very aware of is creating opportunities for people who are disabled. Where we go from here, well, life is complicated, isn't it? Because we know that we've got to fundraise. So what we've been doing is we've been trying to build a community through working across all the councillors, no matter, it's a community project. And actually, I have to say, I don't know whether it's because of the new council, I suppose they all want to be seen to be successful, but anyway, they all seem to be going away and saying, yes, I'll take that away and do something about it. So we've linked with all of those and had some really fruitful discussions. We'll see what comes out of it, to solve some problems with amenities in the park, which have been there for a long time. The other thing that we do is, again, going back to partnerships, we try to link with other key stakeholders in terms of Abington Park. Clearly, the museum and the museum service is a huge part of our life, and we are of theirs as well, as is the church in the park. And we're trying to link all those much more closely, and we're working very well with that. And I'm quite pleased with the way that's going. And then we share events as well. So we try to go to theirs. So at the weekend, one of the local churches, United Reformed Church, had an eco event for the community, because they, like others, and like the rest of you on the panel, are saying is that, you know, it's by getting together that more can get done. It was interesting because obviously they each have different communities. They're different from us, and we're sometimes different from them. So we try to share events as well. And the other thing that we do normally, COVID's been a bit of a pain, hasn't it? But normally we carry out quite regular visitor surveys about what people would like to see in the park, how they would like the park to be used, and what they dislike as well. Because I think it's really important to keep in touch with the people who are using the amenities, because sadly, a huge proportion of them, of course, are not necessarily members of the Friends, nor do they have to be. But we do want to try and serve the needs of as wide a community as possible. I think that's about it, really, Rachel. It's, you know, working from the bottom up is the way I tend to describe it.
Thank you, Anne. And I got that very strong sense from everybody about the importance of the grassroots in building community. And thank you for highlighting the importance of green space, what it means to people's lives, how important it is to make it accessible and also safe, and also the importance of communications. And it sounds like you're bringing a lot of groups and people together across the park, which is probably building other opportunities for building safe towns and enabling them to access more activities and thrive. So thank you all for giving that introduction into the amazing work that you do within our county. So over to our first question for our panel, and environmental scientist and philanthropist Jack Dangermond has stated the following: that our world is evolving without consideration, and the result is a loss of biodiversity, energy issues, congestion in cities. But geography, if used correctly, can be used to redesign sustainable and more livable cities. And I think that applies to towns and villages that we live in within our community. So with further resources, as a panel, what local solutions would you like to see being funded? And from your perspective, is there any specific immediate needs you think is an urgent priority for this particular global goal? And that could be accessible community transport, protecting the culture and natural heritage of our county, increasing inclusive and accessible access to green spaces. So over to Phil.
I'm doing quite well today. I keep remembering to turn the mic on. I often speak and then realise that nobody can hear me. Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it will come as no surprise that, of course, I'm going to pick the community transport, sustainable community transport as a thing, because that's what we do. DAC's always been really blessed with the amount of volunteers and stuff that have been willing to commit themselves. Daventry seems to be a fantastic place for volunteering. Up until the pandemic, we had about 160 volunteers who offered tens of thousands of hours over the year in terms of the various services and things that we provide, and it's always amazed me just the amount of people that are kind of committed to it. But obviously, since the pandemic, a lot of our volunteers are retired folks, so some of them have had to pull out and stuff due to their own health concerns, etc., etc. So I'd say probably at the moment we're on about 90 volunteers. So in terms of sustainability, that is obviously a big thing for us, particularly as a lot of our volunteers tend to be at the older end of the age brackets. So obviously we need to have some sustainable plans about how we're going to replace those volunteers who haven't been able to come back, and also longer term, what happens when those that are still here get to the point where they need to step down for whatever reason. We need to have others coming through that can then help to continue the services on. Basically, none of DAC's services will run without volunteers. So although we have paid members of staff, they're coordinators and kind of making things happen, but it's actually the volunteers who deliver the services. So without them, we wouldn't be able to do anything. I think one of the issues we also face is on a health side of things, is that there's the introduction of what's called social prescribing. So apologies if people know what I'm talking about, and I'm just teaching you to suck eggs, but basically it's a fund that's been given mainly to kind of medical practices and stuff, where there isn't necessarily a medication or something like that can be given to somebody to help them better improve their circumstances, or there's an alternative like maybe physical exercise or something that can be prescribed. The problem with it is all the funding goes to the medical practices, but my biggest issue, and it always will be, and it will come throughout most of what I say, is the fact that when people put on events or send people to things, they don't always think about how they're going to get there. So most of us, most of our passengers and stuff are elderly or disabled. So it's all right saying to them, you can go to the local health centre and join in this exercise class. But their question is, well, how do I get there? So of course they contact DACT. In terms of our locality, the problem is all the money goes to the medical folks to actually prescribe them to send them somewhere else, where someone else then has to pick up that resource. But of course, the money doesn't follow it. So from our perspective, for example, in Daventry, there's a health organisation called Reach for Health, which does a fantastic work here in Daventry, helping people keep up with their fitness and health and all the rest of it. But local medical practices are referring a lot of people there, and the first port of call is always going to be us. So although a lot of medical practices are sending people there, we're not getting any funding to help that. And we saw an increase in our medical car transport of about 45% when it first started up with the social prescribing, because they basically sending everybody to us to get a lift. So that's one of the things that we need to look at in terms of sustainability as well. And I think there needs to be more thought given to transport in general, particularly for rural areas like Daventry District, which is where we cover at the moment, because there's so many villages and hamlets. I think there's something like 84 villages. So you've got Daventry as the central hub, but you've got something like 84 villages around, and a load of those don't actually have any public transport. So people can't actually get anywhere. So that's one of the issues I think needs to be sorted out. It's all right coming up with ideas and schemes and plans, but how are people going to get there? And I think the last thing really just to say in that is, having seen some unsustainable approaches in the past, one of which was called County Connect, where there was this idea of having buses that would act almost like taxis, and they'd go around to the rural villages picking people up and then take them to a central place like Northampton or Rugby, those kind of things, for people to go do shopping or whatever. But the problem was, is if you were the first person to get picked up at one end of the district, and you would have to then wait for them to go around and pick up everybody else in the bus. And so you could have been sitting on that bus for 2 or 3 hours, waiting for the rest of the people to get picked up before you got dropped off at the place that you actually wanted to go. So again, for me, it is just keeping conversation going about these things so that we can actually come up with something that is actually sustainable rather than just chucking money at something. So that would be my thoughts.
Thank you, Phil. I think you made some really key points about the importance of community transport, it being properly resourced and supported in terms of sustaining volunteers, and also in terms of social prescribing models to connect people within their communities to activities and events, to recognise the key role of that community transport service, and for it to be properly resourced. But also in models of best practice, there's opportunities, as you quite rightly say, for local authorities to utilise the expertise that already exists about sustainable transport and making it a meaningful, worthwhile experience for people, as opposed to sitting on a bus for 4 hours and only having 1 hour in Northampton. So thank you for that, Phil. Really insightful. Over to George.
Hi, yeah. So Phil gives me lots of things to think about when he's talking about the community transport, because it's something that the conversation that we've had as well. So, but here in Corby, I think that having safer public spaces for all is really important, really important. So that, because fresh air, and if people don't have gardens, I remember somebody, I think the first speaker was talking about, you know, that people don't have that space. Like in where I live, there's a lot of green space, so just to celebrate those and use them and make them safer for all is really important, as the benefits are, I think, immeasurable. The other thing that I would mention is the energy issue. Is a big concern with the rise in the energy prices and the crisis that's going on. So the insulation stuff, I know that a lot of homes in this area there's 40% of the homes in Kingswood and Hazel Lees, I think, are still in the hands of the council, and the rest are private. But so the energy is a big concern, and it will get worse. And to use that phrase that is used often is, people will be choosing between heating and eating, you know, and that will be older people who traditionally have been, don't know what to say, neglected, but you know, there's big concerns there, and there's conversations going on within our community how we, as a small organisation relatively, can support that. And then with the cuts in the universal credit, that's another dimension, and the rise in the national insurance for the lower paid, and so there's a bit of a storm brewing, and we are trying to do what we can, but we need to do it together. You know, there needs to be, you know, and I don't want to get too political, but some really cruel, I think, choices have been made by our leaders, and in almost, because a lot of people who are on universal credit are in work, and that £20 might not seem like a lot to a lot of people, but it's a lot to other people, you know, so that's a big concern. Just the main thing is we are talking about it, and hopefully we can get together and do something about it, and identify, because a lot of people will not come out and say that they're in trouble. You know, they'll batten down the hatches, you know, and Anne, you mentioned the newsletter thing as well. A lot of people are digitally excluded as well, so that printed newsletter I really like, because we do that as well. We put out, you know, our, you know, a little newsletter. We do the MailChimp stuff and we do the email stuff, but the printed one is really useful as well. So yeah, I always try and look at the bright side, but I've just got a little feeling in the pit of my stomach that things are you know, we're coming into a winter of real challenges, further challenges.
Thank you, George. I think a really profound point about poverty and in relation to people enjoying sustainable towns, cities and communities. If you can't afford to go out, if you're living in poor housing, if you're worried about heating or eating, and you're not necessarily connected to your community, it can be a real challenge to be able to enjoy what's on your doorstep. And that shouldn't be taken for granted by others who might not have had that experience. So it's great to have highlighted for you and Anne how you really try not to leave anyone left behind. So if people don't have access to the internet, then a newsletter could be a lifeline to somebody about what's going on in their community. I think your really important points about the importance of safety of public spaces, so people feel safe in the places that they're enjoying on their doorstep, and also the point about air pollution, as Jenny highlighted some alarming stats in her introduction as our global goal champion, but also about quality of housing stock and the energy issue. It starts at home, and you know, if people aren't feeling safe and well in housing that's where they feel financially stable, then that can make a big difference as to whether people have the time or space to be able to enjoy what's on their doorstep. So that important point about national and local policy reflecting what community groups and charities are trying to achieve on the ground to help boost what they're doing, and also making sure that services are supportive and inclusive. So some really important points there. Thank you. Over to Anne.
Oh my goodness. Well, the previous speakers have highlighted what really they're societal problems, aren't they? And I think, you know, I so agree with you that, you know, you feel kind of out of control, don't you? That things are going on at a high level, and here we are down on the ground witnessing, you know, the victims of a lot of the decisions being made. And so I think really my response is to try to do what I think we're all aiming to do, which is to try and respond to those needs, at least within the pocket within which we've got. So, yeah, I mean, Rachel, you said so much already about all the green spaces and so on, absolutely. The difficulty, if I take, you know, the park that we have, it has advantages and disadvantages in that it is close to the town centre, which is great. People can walk there. And one of our campaigns has been about, you know, why drive to the park? Why not make part of your walk walking to the park? Because we then have a parking problem. But so it's good that it is so central. It's also surrounded by all sorts of different housing and issues, and some of those problems that you mentioned in Corby just now, yeah, we have as well. The trouble is, when people think of Abington, they think of the side of the park with the big posh houses. They don't look at the other three sides where there's actually an awful lot of issues going on, of all the things that you've all mentioned. And most of the people that use the park are people who are living in multi-occupancy or have no access to any other green space. And as we say, it is really important that we keep those spaces as safe as we can. One of the downsides of being close to the town centre is that as they clear issues, and that's in inverted commas clear, such as people sleeping on the streets or drug users, they move along to the park. And so inevitably people move into the park. Currently, we have quite a major problem with the use of drugs, so that we're encouraging people in, but actually it can be quite dangerous. And and I think keeping the places safe is a big issue. And we've had a number of conversations going on about how we can improve and work on the one hand with the police and on the other hand in other ways to try and make that better. In terms of sustaining the environment for the future, we have the problem that others have mentioned in that the volunteers we do have, who are not as numerous as they are in Daventry, I'm quite envious about all that, but they tend to be elderly. And I think one of the things that we've been trying to do is engage younger people in some of the campaigns. We have had a couple of successes, and I think that maybe there are some lessons there. So what we found worked quite well was starting with really young children, you know, reception and first reception class or preschool kids. And we started with a feeding the duck campaign, because they all go down and feed the ducks. They tended to feed the ducks with bread, which apart from that was bad for the ducks, it polluted the water. And actually, it has worked really well because the kids tell their parents, and you then find that actually it died. And of course, people were, in feeding the ducks, I should point out that whole loaves of bread went in, including the plastic wrapper. You know, they don't just feed them a few breadcrumbs. So we did find that that worked. And then we had another project where we've done 3 tree trails, and we worked on a project with another group, and those tree trails have gone into all the primary schools around the park, and they teach the children about the trees and the bugs and all of those sorts of things. And we're hoping that if we can involve the children at a very young age in specific things like preserving nature and the water and all the rest of it, that they will in fact, you know, take that and work with it. The other thing that we've been trying to do, and I think we might have finally won a battle on this one, we were looking to install interpretation and information boards about various things to do with the area. In our case, one of my bugbears about Northampton in general, actually, although I think improving a bit now, is to build on the history of the place, because visitors are interested in a whole panoply of things. Yes, they're interested in the green spaces and all of that, but also the history of it. There's a hidden medieval village. There's all sorts of things over there. And so we're trying to provide information boards so that as we develop the park, we're able to say, today we've got in this area, for example, we just built a new community garden, which is proving very popular, but it actually, originally, it was a fish pond to the manor house that's in there. So, you know, there's quite a lot of stories that can be told. And again, we were hoping that if people got engaged with the stories, they might also then get more involved with sustaining into the future, which is a real fear that we have, because actually these parklands are very valuable building areas, are they not? And so looking forwards, I think one of the ways we're trying to create this sustainability, I think, is to focus on specific projects. That seems to be a good way of going about it, instead of just saying, can we get more young people involved in one way or another? So at the moment, we're looking at a couple of things. One is we're linking up with the Green Canopy project and the tree planting. And we're hoping that that will involve people in, you know, looking at the issues, because the problem with the trees in the park is a lot of them are reaching the end of their natural lives, and there's not very much succession planting, as was pointed out to me recently. And the other thing is to use the space at the museum in the park. We're very fortunate to have it. Unfortunately, I don't have the money to be open very much. But we've had all sorts of offers to work on projects where the children can work in the park doing, say, pond dipping and stuff, but then go into the museum and have a little free workshop, which has been offered to us by the wonderful Mike Cosgrove group in town, to offer the children, you know, the opportunity to learn about what they've just picked up out of the pond or the mud patch outside or whatever it is they've done. And so I think if we can engage the next generation, hopefully we will build something that does sustain it. But sustainability is something that I think is a problem. Sustainability and safety, I think, are big issues for us. But it sounds as though everybody's got the same sorts of problems. And I think since COVID, whilst it's been great that the parks have been used so much, they've also been abused as well. And we try to counter that as far as we can. think that's about all I can really say.
Thank you, Anne. I think you've just given a real insight into the wonderful work that Friends of Abington Park are doing to help preserve the cultural and natural heritage of Northamptonshire within Northampton, and how that has additional benefits in terms of education, in terms of health. Indeed, we know that there's that new term that's been coined in terms of green spaces and trees, the Natural Health Service, which Abington Park clearly is an exemplar of. But again, the issue about in order to resource those kinds of projects that support sustainable cities, towns and villages, the need to boost resources and funding for volunteer recruitment across the generations, by the sounds of it, and also the importance of safety within all of that work that's happening as well. So thank you. So we move on to our next question for our panel. Which is, during the COVID-19 pandemic, as you know, we supported and funded a number of community groups and charities, such as the great work you're all doing, that clearly provided a lifeline to many people who are at risk of social isolation, were cut off from social spaces and networks, and equally many residents had a different experience of their local communities, such as connecting with green and public spaces. As we recover from the pandemic, how can the charitable sector help to contribute to improving people's positive experiences of their local town, village or community, taking into account something which has been identified by you all already about creating sustainable, inclusive and safe places? Over to Phil.
I think we were definitely one of those groups that had some funding from the Community Foundation, which we were really grateful for. Helped us, as probably many other projects, in difficult times to kind of keep going with some of the services and things that would have been otherwise hard to fund due to a lack of use, etc. So we were very grateful for that, and it certainly helped us support our members doing that as well. Can I just say to George, actually, before I go any further, George, I didn't know if you knew, but there is actually a Corby voluntary carpool scheme that you did know about that. Okay, that's fine. Just so that you're aware.
Just reply to that. One Isa Leadham is one of the drivers, and a lot of the drivers, are of an older age as well, aren't they? So yeah. And it just relates to Anne's point about engaging with the younger folk as well, which is always a challenge, but a challenge is only an opportunity in disguise.
Absolutely. Cool. As long as you know about it. Answering the question, I guess the simple answer for us is getting our services fully operational again and getting things up and running as quickly as we possibly can. And then once we've done that, as always, is to be looking to see where we can develop and where we can kind of expand and become more sustainable. As all of us, I think, keep saying, when you've got a vast majority of your volunteers that are at the older end of the scale, we need to have strategies in place to be looking at how we sustain that, because I don't want to get to the point with our volunteers where we kind of just think, oh, they're there, and then 10 minutes later they're not there, and then you haven't got any services. So for me, we really do need to start tapping into the younger generation in terms of that. I'm also very aware that during the pandemic, there was loads of volunteering schemes that were set up through the NHS and other organisations, and here in Daventry there was at least 2 or 3 that were set up here, where people were encouraged, because there was a lot of folks obviously not necessarily going into work and those kind of things, and were given the freedom to kind of help with volunteering. And I'm just aware that a lot of those people have disappeared now that things are happening. And again, a lot of those people will be going back to work, and who were perhaps not at work, etc. But there must have been some folks around who aren't in that position, or perhaps work part-time, or those kind of things, that were willing to help. And I think it would be a shame if we lost those people going back to just getting busy with life again, and rather than trying to maintain that mentality of being available to help others. So yeah, I think what we're seeing at the moment in terms of things getting started up again, I'll probably highlight our DAC Days Out. We're seeing a massive increase in enthusiasm and bookings for our DAC days out at this moment in time. For our September to December programme that we've got going at the moment, we've currently got 650 passengers kind of booked on various trips and stuff that are going out just during that period of time. And obviously we're only, you know, towards the end of September. We've still got October, November, December to go yet. So that number will increase over time. So for me, it just goes to show how people are getting back out there again and enthusiastic to get involved in their local spaces and in their local communities and meet friends again and meet new friends and all that kind of thing, which I think is essential for kind of getting things up and running after what's been a very difficult period for a lot of folks. And I think the other thing that we saw a lot of is particularly for our medical car medical journeys and stuff, when the NHS started opening up for more kind of routine appointments and things like that again, and we started taking some of our elderly folks. It was so sad to hear some of the stories from our drivers who would pick somebody up who literally hadn't spoken to another human being other than on the phone for about 13, 14 months. And it's just like, it just blew us away here, just the amount of people that were saying, oh, it's so great to get out and you know, just for the volunteer driver and being able to chat to the driver and talk to them and tell them what they've been, you know, what they want to get involved in, what they want to do. And for us, just hearing so many stories about people who haven't just spoke to another individual during that period of time, it was yeah, very, very sad really to hear those kind of things, but great to see them getting out and picking up on their enthusiasm again. So that's probably my answer.
Thank you for, I think you've given a really sad insight into the difficulty, challenges and trauma that a lot of people have faced over the last 18 months during the pandemic, and the surge in social isolation and loneliness, and how essential services like DACT have provided a lifeline and will help people in their emotional, mental and physical recovery from the pandemic by providing safe, friendly transport so people can get out on days out and reconnect and rebuild friendships and contact. And again, just that point, as you highlighted, about the need in order to sustain and support that recovery, proper resourcing of volunteer networks for groups that are doing that work up front. So thank you. Over to George.
Yes, a project that we are working on, a programme actually, and one of the projects is trying to get people involved in the creative activities. And throughout the pandemic, we were sending, and other organisations were doing this throughout the county, I think, sending out art packs. So people were taking part in drawing and painting and a bit of writing as well. So we at Creative Civic Change, which is another organisation I'm involved with, we are consulting about street art now, and we've had pop-up events where we've had you know, consultation events where people are coming along and giving us their ideas of what they would like to do in the creative world, you know, and one of the things that struck me was a lot of people were saying that, oh, I'm not creative, but actually, you know, everybody's an artist. You know, we grew up as artists, and then sometimes life gets in the road of our creative things, and so that's a real positive thing that we are doing now. And it's given me an opportunity to engage in the creative, or get back to the creative journey, and seeing others in my community take part in it is really positive. So, and I want that to continue and be sustainable and make it accessible as well, because, you know, some people worry about, you know, buying material. So we have monies that we can invest in getting or making sure that people have what they need. And that might not just be painting equipment. It could be music lessons, or, you know, with the community shed opening up in Hazel Ease, it might be woodwork, sewing, other craft activities. So that's something that we are really focused on, because in having some joy in your life amidst all this storm that's around is really helpful and valuable. And the isolation thing is a big thing as well. You know, I mean, like people have said before, is a lot of people haven't spoken to people, and, you know, that's heartbreaking. And actually there was a problem before that, because I reckon that I heard that there was 1.5 million people didn't speak to somebody from week to week, you know, older people as well. So we talk about this great caring community. You know, we probably get neighbours that we don't really, you know, say hello to. It's just I just think we need to try and reach out a little bit more and make people know that there are organisations, individuals willing to just to try and make people's lives that a little bit better.
Thank you, George. I think thank you for being one of the bringers of joy into people's communities and lives. I think that you made a really important point at the beginning about involving the community. There's a saying, isn't there? Nothing about us without us. Asking people what they actually would like to see in their area. And so you can ensure that the services and activities that you provide are well used because they reflect what people want to see. And the importance of play for adults and an older generation. As you say, we forget how to play, we forget how to create, and being able to help people build culture, which is what play and creativity is about, whether that be music, whether that be origami or photography. And then an important point there about all of these activities that build our towns, villages, our communities, help build connections. So once you build those connections, people are more likely to use those services and activities, or people's palaces, as I like to call them, because they know that they can meet friends and they look forward to going to those events because they can catch up and talk and connect. And as you say, isolation and loneliness was already a big issue before the pandemic hit, but I think the pandemic's just exposed how much of a problem that is and the importance of keeping people connected through providing activities and services. And that quick important point you said about information, access to information, so people know what's happening on their doorstep and how they can get involved. Thank you. Over to Anne.
Well, it's hard to add to all that, isn't it, really? Because I think we're all basically, I think, saying the same sorts of things, but just in different contexts, which is quite interesting. From our point of view, for me, one of the saddest things is that I've had lots and lots of offers of something called, we'd like to volunteer to help in the park. And for us, I think it's probably different for the other two panelists, but for us as just a community group, we can't just say to people, yes, come over every Wednesday morning and help clear a stream or do some litter picking, because we have to have public liability insurance, which we have, but which has now changed. The whole relationship between the council and us on that score has changed. It's quite limited. So we get, for example, I've had a lot of kids aged between about 14 and 16 wanting to do Duke of Edinburgh, looking for stuff to do. But it's quite, I'm looking into it, and I think we're about to change the way that we use our insurance so that we can cover them. But it's been quite enlightening listening to the rest of you, and I might come back to you, Rachel, one of your colleagues, for a bit more advice on that, because I think it's really sad that one way in which we can build the community is to build in to the school-age children who are looking for opportunities because they're doing things like D&V or other things as well. And I think that that would be a very good way of doing them a favour, but also capturing a bit. It has to be safe and they have to be supervised. And so there are costs and organisational issues around that, and we can't take on all of that. So I'm not quite sure really of the best way to move forward, but I might come back on that, because I found that very difficult. What we are able to offer is that they can come and help with things like gardening, because we have a little gardening group who do, we look after certain bits of the park. We have to be careful, because otherwise you can get shoved over by the council and they say, well, you can do all the gardening then. Well, no, that's not the point. But I think that if we could extend and change that around a bit. So for example, one of the things we've got is we're in the process, we've got a big partnership with Rotary, who are developing a very large community bed, a peace garden, actually. It's going to be great. And because Rotary are there as well as responsible adults, then we can bring these volunteers in. But I think it's frustrating for both the parents and the children who are looking for volunteering opportunities, but we can't immediately say, yes, pop round every Tuesday from next week. It's not as simple as that. And that's quite sad, I find, in a way. And just to say on the creative side, absolutely. We ran an event called Art in the Park recently, where children came and did absolutely all sorts of things, quite simple things. And actually, it was really successful. And just as you were saying, George, actually, the parents got as much joy out of it as the kids. And think that the people organising it all took a photograph of everybody's piece of art, and they could either take it home or leave it there or whatever they were doing. But I think that if we could develop some of those more imaginative and creative aspects, and we are, as I said before, looking to work with the museum, because the other problem, of course, is the weather, isn't it? That we need to have somewhere where if the weather is not suitable, we can step inside and do things. And lots will be happening at the museum, and that is going to become quite a community hub over the next couple of years. And I think that will help us enormously. But otherwise, yeah, we share all the issues that the rest of you have. And I certainly welcome any joined up thinking, I'll put it that way, that others have, or ideas that you have about how better to promote those kinds of activities. And just to say that I think they do have to be free. I think it is all about that. The parks, somebody said to me once that they were the most democratic thing that's left in our society. And in a sense they are, aren't they? Because they're free to everybody to use in ways that they wish. They offer a variety of amenities. You can either be super fit like Rachel there, or like me and toddle around, whatever it is, but we can all take something from it for free. And I do think that that's a very important part of what they have to offer. I think that's
I think you've just basically summed up a book by Eric Klinenberg, who's a sociologist, and it's called here, Palaces for People.
Oh, right.
And it's about how to build a more equal and united society through our shared spaces. So I think you've basically summed a whole book up in a couple of paragraphs.
That's right.
So well done, Anne.
That's interesting.
But what you've just said also reminded me of actually a great essay by Raymond Williams, and it's called Culture is Ordinary. And it's what you just said about art that really struck me. You know, art is often perceived as this highbrow thing that happens and that's quite expensive. You have to pay to go to a ballet or opera or musical, but actually it is an ordinary everyday experience that everybody has a right to access in an affordable and accessible way. And the importance of building community hubs and you know, building people's exploration of their communities through the arts. So that the Art in the Park activity sounds great, and what a great way of connecting children and parents together through that kind of and grandparents through that intergenerational activity. And the importance of community through garden space. It's a big hobby that everybody loves and enjoys, and being able to provide opportunities for volunteers to connect and support that. And again, the importance of partnership activity. So thank you very much. So we move on to probably what is known on our panel as our most challenging question that we put to our panelists. So what is your vision for Northamptonshire in 2030, given the conversation that we've had? So what do you hope we can have achieved by then to build more sustainable towns and communities for all local residents on our doorstep in Northamptonshire? Phil, over to you, no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a global question, isn't it? So I could have probably written an essay, like most people, I should think, on what my perspective is. But so just to focus it in on, I think from a DACT perspective, I think what we would like to see is community transport services being provided across the county that offer a quality service and enables residents to access any community facility or provision, a health or medical facilities and provision, or any other services that they need to enhance their lives, is basically how I summed it up from a community transport point of view. I think the challenge comes, having had recent conversations with local authorities, is that it's all about how do you make that sustainable within finances as well as the practicalities. So there's lots of talk about whether community transport organisations should start pooling together, should start looking at things together. And for me, that makes things quite challenging, because obviously everybody's got their own expertise in their various communities in which they're working. Equally, our organisation was set up by our founder, Rob, who has taken 27 years to get us to the point where we are now. So you're not going to do these things overnight, but there doesn't seem to be that understanding sometimes when you're having the larger conversations with a a larger group of people, and you can't just pick up what Daventry's got, or you can't just pick up what Northampton's got and stick it somewhere else. It's you know, it's taken a long time to get it to where it is, and it's a community buy-in. If the community doesn't buy in, then at the end of the day, from our perspective, when it comes to volunteering, you've lost before you start. And for me, asking people in Daventry to go to, say, I don't know, Kettering or wherever, to kind of go and help people out there, you may well find some that are willing to do so, but that's a massive commitment compared to saying, do you want to help somebody in Daventry? I think there's lots of issues around those things and trying to make it work. And I didn't want to finish on a negative point. I think the positive thing is let's have conversations. Let's see what we can do. Let's keep heading in the right direction. Yeah, it's just bearing in mind it's not always easy as it seems on paper.
So thank you, Phil. So in 2030, the direction of travel, no pun intended, for community transport is to have PAN coverage across Northamptonshire, where anybody in need of to access a facility, a medical service, or any other services, whether that be shopping or going to visit a friend or family member, will be guaranteed a regular, well-resourced community transport in areas where public transport, perhaps where there's gaps. So, and in order to do that, in order for that to happen, again, highlighting that importance of collaboration across communities, charities, local government. Thank you. George, your vision for 2030?
It's a big question. My big answer would be I would like Northamptonshire to continue to be the great county it is. I would like Northamptonshire to continue to share the learning, share the experience, share with each other, you know, grow together, all that, you know. For my own community, I want to see, you know, I want to make see people's lives improve, you know, and a word that came to mind, you mentioned, it was fun. You know, sometimes life becomes so serious that we forget to have fun, you know. So and I'm always, you know, there's another quote, and Rachel and I were just chatting in the chat about quotes. The quote that sustains me, actually, I would say, is every day may not be good, but there's something good in every day. So the fact that we're here today doing what we can, you know, for each other, for our community, for our family, or you know, whatever that might be, it's that giving thing. So I just want to see that continue and grow. It needs to be resourced properly. You know, volunteers needs to be recognised and celebrated, as do the professionals as well. So I don't, you know, because you're a professional, because you're a volunteer, but the thing is that people are doing something, you know, they're trying to make a positive impact, you know, and they're doing it for the right reasons. So, and we should celebrate that, recognise it, reward it, whether a volunteer might be days out or some food, breaking bread together. But yeah, just keep going, just keep the faith. If you know, if you have faith, just keep going. Thank
you, George. And I often think about you as the quote doctor because of the amazing quotes you always end your emails with, which are always inspiring. I think that should be a service that should be provided to all, particularly when people are having more challenging days. I think that's really, really important what you said about almost like the soul of the county, if you like, about building caring communities where people want to connect, where people care about their neighbours, friends, families, and strangers who may be friends they haven't met yet. And also rewarding that giving and recognising and providing credit for those who do take the time to give their free offer of service to others in their community to help build those communities, and the importance of creating fun in the lives of people within communities so that beyond work, beyond family life, they can create and play in a safe environment within their areas and you know, experience some of the joy of life, which is hopefully what we aspire to by building thriving communities. So thank you for those thoughts for building a better future. Over to you, Anne. What's your vision for 2030?
I was just writing down those quotes, actually, Rachel. I didn't know you had a lot more, but they're brilliant, aren't they? Yeah, 2030. I suppose number one for me would be that Abington Park is still there because, you know, our green spaces are under threat, and, you know, we are preaching to the converted here, but, you know, it's really important that we do preserve them. Part of what we've been looking to do, while we haven't actually been able to do some of the things we normally do, is we're trying to create a very comprehensive strategic plan for the park. And it's very complicated because everybody has different priorities. So that we've got the starting point, we have a Green Flag Award, and there's a very comprehensive 98-page report that goes in with that covers all the different aspects of the park and its importance. But alongside that, we want to create a conservation management plan, which would be a very much more detailed look at all the green spaces within the park and what should be done, and planning for the future. So we make sure that the small things we do day to day feed into that strategic vision. And as a starting point, what I've started to try and do is to engage everyone who's involved with the park, people sometimes that I don't currently even know about, to comment on ideas that come forward. So that if we apply for funding, for example, Rachel, we can say that all these 20 or 30 stakeholders have all said it complies with what they're doing, because there are conflicts of interest, and we have them resolved through our park management committee, which works very well. But I think that if we can put it all together in one plan so that everybody understands why something is or isn't being done, I think that would help. And I think it also is helpful, I presume, for funders as well, to understand that what we're looking to do is part of a longer term strategy. There was one other idea which I would love to see come in, which I mentioned to councillors. I think they were a bit taken up with one or two other things at the time, like reorganisation. But this business about recognising the social contribution that youngsters can make, why can't we have a recognition in schools whereby they could get, say, UCAS points or some kind of something valuable for kids at that stage in their, particularly post 16, that's what I was thinking, but could be earlier, where for their social services, they get something of value to them. I've lived for a while in Spain, and over there, you know, the kids all have to do some sort of social service. So not military service, but, you know, the girls would go and work in a hospital somewhere or a charity somewhere, but then they would get recognition for that. And I think if we could offer some sort of incentive to that group in between school and adulthood, school and whatever else they're going to do, I think we could capture them, and that they would discover so much more about this voluntary sector. As I've done. I mean, I was doing some work when I was still at work, but I had a very exciting professional life. But I have met the most inspiring people since I stopped and met all these volunteers who I just think, including some of those today, I think it's just amazing what people do. And I think if youngsters could witness that for themselves, I think it would inspire them to volunteer, but I think importantly, they're going to be the leaders of the future, aren't they? So if they come out of school with these values really embodied, entrenched in them, that whatever they go on to do, they will hopefully then take that forward. And I would love to see that happen.
Thank you, Anne. So in 2030, we won't only have Abington Park, but we will have preserved our natural heritage, and that would be enshrined somewhere as a commitment, as an ongoing commitment in perpetuity. And by that time as well, we would recognise the importance of long-term planning from here to now, so that we have those sustainability strategies in place to support green spaces and parks and other similar green spaces like allotments and so on and so forth. And then by that time, we will have also enshrined the value of volunteering into a younger generation, so that we're building the responsible citizens and community leaders of the future who will help us take care of our spaces and cities and towns and villages. Thank you all so much for your contributions, George, Phil and Anne. You've been amazing and been really inspiring, really thought-provoking, challenging, really insightful, and a real testimony to the great work that you do. This community conversation has been recorded and will go out via our social media platforms and on our YouTube channel, and so people can benefit and be inspired, stimulated and challenged by your commentary based on your expertise and experience in your respective areas of work. We will take from this recorded conversation 4 community actions, and we're building a local UN charter for Northamptonshire based on our series of community conversations, which we will launch later in the year, and will reflect some of the key expertise and feedback that we've received from you today. So thank you so much, and a big thank you to our Global Goals Ambassador, Jenny, and her brilliant insight and research into UN SDG 11, which has helped contribute to this conversation. So wishing everybody safe and well, and thank you for your time and insight into this global goal.